Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Open Mic Comedy Podcast. I'm your host, Mark. This podcast here is for people on the open mic circuit, whether you're a comedian, an MC, a promoter, a tutor, or just anybody who has any involvement in this industry. Or whether you're a comedy fan who really does enjoy spending all their time in pub basements watching the possible stars of the future. Or even better, if you want to join in on this circuit and want a bit of first-hand warning on what to expect, this is definitely the place for you. Today's guest is currently flying in the comedy scene. He's been a finalist in the Chorlton Student Comedy Award for 2022. He won Backyard's Comedy Knockout last year. He's performed at both Latitude Festival and the Edinburgh Fringe. Has been seen at some of the hottest comedy clubs all around the UK. And most recently crowned winner of the Birminghams Comedy Festival Breaking Talent Award for 2023. That is a mouthful. He is one of the politest people I've spoken to on the comedy circuit and definitely does not want to cancel Christmas. It's an absolute pleasure to have him here today. Please welcome Hasan Al-Habib.
Yeah,
Welcome.
right, Bab. How's it going? Nice to see you, mate. Thank you very much for having me on, Mark. That esteemed introduction. Thank you.
That's cool. That's cool. So how have you been?
Good. Yeah, good. Busy and gigging a lot. But really good and happy to be gigging. I think as like most comedians are, like really happy to be busy all the time and trying to write new stuff and trying to test new stuff and see new stuff fail and etc. etc. But yeah, all good. Thank you.
Cool. So I guess the first question for every stand-up is how long have you been doing this and how and why did you take into this journey of trying to make people laugh?
Do you know what? One of the big ambitions for me coming into comedy was to be crowned the open mic circuit's most polite comedian. And so genuinely the best aspect of the introduction you gave me. So if I can retain that crown until I retire, that I was very, very flattered when you said that. I think I wanted to get into comedy because it might sound a bit arrogant, I don't know, but I used to watch Live at the Apollo when I was growing up, maybe like a early teenager, and think I know friends at school that make me laugh more than this.
Yeah.
And yet these people are on the biggest stage in the UK. They're on TV at prime time whilst I'm eating my chips. They're on television being introduced by whoever. So why shouldn't this be an ambition for me as well?
Yeah.
And I think also, and I'd be interested to know if you felt the same way, like watching comedy, I always felt comedy was the most meritocratic of the arts.
Yeah.
Because acting, people succeed in acting because of who their dad is or who their mum is or how they look or the sort of profession they did before. Maybe they were a famous footballer like Vinnie Jones or a famous model or whatever.
Yeah.
But in comedy, no one goes to see Michael McIntyre because of who he's related to or because he has a six-pack. They go because he makes them laugh. Like that's the only thing that takes them to that venue and makes them pay for that ticket. So it just seemed to be the most meritocratic art form. So I just remember, and I love making people laugh, obviously, like all comedians. So yeah, it seemed an ambition from an early age.
Yeah, it's I think I saw somebody describe a comedian as your own writer, producer, actor, and director all in one. So I guess it does require a bit of a rounding of skills, whether we're all good at all of those skills or not. I think it's something that we as comedians try to, I say comedians, I don't call myself a comedian, but we try to learn as we go.
Absolutely.
I don't want to stand still. I want to move forward. I want to learn how to do things, and just watching other people do it it can be quite inspiring. So you mentioned Friends. You've seen Friends that are that were funnier than the people at the Apollo and stuff like that. So have any of those friends got on to do anything? Or have
I
you just
don't.
gone nuts? See you later, boys. I'm off.
I don't know that I had any other friends. It's a good question. I don't know that I had any other friends growing up who wanted to be comedians. I don't know anyone from school. No, no one from school that wanted to be a comedian is doing comedy, is even tr doing like open mic circuit comedy, anything like that.
Yeah.
It wasn't a widely held ambition. Now you mentioned it, whereas like everyone wanted to be a footballer, including me.
Hmm.
Um, but it's not something I've entirely ruled out either. But we'll see how bad this injury crisis at Liverpool gets.
It's Klopp on speed dial.
Yeah, exactly. I'm awaiting the call. No, yeah. So I guess it wasn't even and I think that's part of the thing that made it more realistic almost is that I never thought that comedy was that competitive to get into.
Mm.
And it kind of lures you in like that because I think especially back then, whereas now, like on social media, basically everyone's a comedian. And in that list you gave of things that comedians have to be, I think a really key one is, unfortunately, publicist. You have to be your
Yeah.
own publicist. You have to be pushing yourself out there, and really the best and to an extent only way is to be on social media, is to be putting out that horrible C word content.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a key aspect of the job now. It's a key people get signed just off how many followers they have. A huge aspect of the industry now, which just didn't exist really even when I was growing up, which is not that long ago.
So, so how long have you been doing this for now? Since
I,
you first stepped on stage?
When I first stepped on stage, it's a bit of a complicated question. When I first stepped on stage, I remember it was a couple of months into my undergrad university. That was back in 2013, yeah,
Hmm.
or maybe very early 2014. But at that particular uni, there wasn't much in the way of gigs, so I'd maybe only gig like once a term, so like 2 or 3 times a year. I was terrified of going onto the open circuit. I did not for a second consider like performing in a pub or a club or anything like that. But I'd say I like started performing regularly in 2017. Probably did that for a good 3 years at uni solidly, and then a year and a half in London like outside of London on the open mic circuit. So
Yeah.
probably about 4.5 years of like regular gigging in total. But started
Okay.
way back in 2017,
Yeah.
2013, 14.
So what got you up on that stage? What made you just think, yeah, why not?
It wasn't a why not. It was a very much like I'm going to uni, and the first thing on my list is I'm going to join the comedy club. And
Right.
I remember being absolutely devastated when I'm flicking through the like freshers brochure or guide of all the clubs they've got, and going under C, and there was like crochet, croquet, but no comedy. I was absolutely devastated. And I remember someone set up a comedy society in January and like publicized it. And I went to the first meeting and I was the only guy there. I was the only
No.
person there. There was just the two founders and me. But I was so happy they'd done it, as it was finally seemed like a route to yeah, doing comedy. Because I think also I'd be interested to know if you were like this as well. Like at school, whenever you had to do a presentation on stage,
Hmm.
I realize now looking back, like that was me trying to do stand up. I was always like putting into my set, my script. I was always putting like highlighting little bits where you could have jokes here, and under the proviso of you keeping them engaged, which of course you are. If you're the only person telling jokes in a presentation, everyone is going to be listening to your presentation.
Yeah.
But I loved it so much. And if you made like the teacher laugh as well, that was like an added bonus because they're not supposed to laugh at your jokes, but they find it that funny they can't resist. It was the best high in the world. And I think you get the same thing now, where if you're like the equivalent now is if you're at a comedy competition,
Hmm.
or like a horrible things, gong shows, and you make a comedian laugh.
Yeah.
You see a comedian laugh, you think, okay, I've done that. That one's like really good for whatever reason. So yeah, no, it was always is that like it was on the to-do list, top of the to-do list to join the comedy clubs was something I really, really wanted to start sooner rather than later when I got to uni.
Yeah. Yeah, mine was slightly different in that I was a very quiet person at school, and I had no inclination to be anything like that. I had nothing. I decided I only got into. It sounds bizarre. I only got into comedy in November 2022,
Mm,
and that was only because I went to my first ever open mic night. At that
wow.
point, my journey, my comedy before that was the stuff you see on TV. The
Yeah.
most alternative comedy I'd seen, or you wouldn't even call it underground, was to go and see that man up there, Dave Gorman,
Right.
do his Google Whack adventure in Leeds on a whim, because I thought, oh, he's a comedian, he's funny, I've got nothing else to do tonight. So I went to see that and I enjoyed that. And then I think my first ever proper stand-up comedy gig I went to see was Lee Evans live at Wembley Arena.
Lee Evans. Wow. What a one to kick things off.
Yeah, so that was what I thought comedy was,
Yeah.
until I went to an open mic night in Newcastle in 2022 and then saw this and thought, this looks fun. How do you get to do it? And my mate went, go and give it a go. And I walked away and went, I don't know how. I've got
Yeah.
no idea. There must be a class or a course or something, and that's how it went. But growing up, I never ever wanted to be the centre of attention. I
Mm.
hated the idea of, if anybody suggested let's have a party for your birthday, no. I don't
Yeah, I
want
was the
people looking
same.
at me.
Yeah,
Don't
yeah, I
want
was the
any
same.
of that. Nothing like that. And then after that night at the stand in Newcastle, it was, let's see how this goes. And it's confused everybody ever since. They're like, but you never wanted to do this. It's like, but I realised that in the job that I do, I'm quite comfortable standing in front of 100, 200 people giving a presentation or a training course.
Yeah.
And that's a lot easier because you're not trying to make them laugh. But, if you're doing a training course for a day, 2 days or whatever, then you've got to try and make it some elements of fun. So that's kind of how I got into it rather than anything else. The desire, I probably wouldn't even speak to a teacher at school, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I get what you. I mean, Mark Cox, Lee Evans. That explains why you're always carrying that towel on stage. Just
I always sweat.
wiping it away. But it's so true because what you see, you're right. Like so often when you see a comedian perform and you think, oh, I didn't even realize that could be comedy. Like what they're doing on stage is like expanding the horizon, expanding the scope of what comedy can be, which is why I think like a lot of the people hopefully listening to this are like comedians that are trying to get better or trying to start the circuit or on the circuit now. And like one of the best pieces of advice I ever got given as a comedian was watch comedy. As simple as that. Watch
Yep.
comedy. Like if you're at a gig, if possible, like come for the beginning of the gig, stay to the end of the gig and see all the comedians perform. Like watch sitcoms, watch specials on Netflix all the time because it's active, it's learning, it's teaching you different joke structures, it's teaching you about timing, it's teaching you about delivery, it's teaching you about how, for example, difficult topics can be joked about. Also, even things like what are comedians wearing, like what are
Yeah.
comedians, you know, doing with their hands, like they've got a drink, all this sort of stuff. It's all learning, and it's key. It's like integral. You can't do comedy just do writing your own stuff and performing your own stuff, and that's it. You'll never develop as a comedian like that.
Oh, I completely agree. It baffles me when you go to an open mic night and one of the comedians is there sat at the back of the room, not doing anything, not engaging with what's going on, looking at their phone, waiting for themselves to go on stage, do their 5 minutes, come off, and then either leave or go to the other bar and have a drink. And you're just kind of like, you're missing this opportunity of seeing what other people are doing. Whether you've got years of experience or not, but that time you see something different.
Yeah.
and unexpected. And it's not even the whole learning; it's that I was there when that happened, because comedy is so instantaneous. It's the moment, isn't it? No matter how many times you watch it back on video, it can always be funny, but it's never going to be funnier than when you're in that room. It can't be, because you've got the infectious laughter of other people as well.
Yeah, so true. No, very, very true. And all that sort of stuff about, and that's what you really start to learn when you're on the circuit versus in an arena, watching Lee Evans.
Yeah.
So doing comedy on the circuit is very, very different. Very, very, very different to doing comedy on stage at Live at the Apollo, for example. And it's such an important lesson to learn, because I think a lot of comedians, for their first gig, you can see it. Like, you can see them basically trying to copy James Acaster and think, like, if I just talk in this like whimsical, absurd way in like a particular voice, it'll go well for me, like it goes for James Acaster. And they don't yet understand, like, the concept of, for example, a crowd being warm, the concept of a crowd being like tight and compact and near to you, and like with a low ceiling, so that the laughs reverberate off the walls and are like and just induce other people to laugh and all that sort of stuff. And I think sometimes people come off gigs and think, why did that go so badly for me? But or say, why did the same joke go well last week, but today it didn't go well? Sometimes it's because of how you delivered it. Sometimes it's because of the joke you decided to put before or put after. But sometimes it's just because you're performing to a totally different audience, and that audience is not into that joke for whatever reason, because jokes have markets, if you like. I mean, there's a lot of learning to be done, as you say, by watching other people's acts, and wherever possible, definitely would have. And even if you're an act that's done like 200, 300 or more, whatever gigs, and you're watching someone who's only maybe done 10 or 20, that doesn't mean you can't learn from them, because, as you say, like, comedy can be so many different things. That the comedy you've been doing for 300 gigs could be completely different from the type of comedy this person is doing, and you can therefore learn things from them. They might be doing joke structures that you've never done or never tried to do. So yeah, absolutely. Just watching whoever you're watching, regardless of level, is really, really key to improvement, I think.
Yeah, I think you can also, if you are, like you say, you're there from the start of the night as well, you're watching other comedians do, which can potentially help with your set as well. So the whole comedy show flows, and you're part of that. You've linked somebody's crass joke or somebody's stupid T-shirt, shall we say? that and you sort of learn where sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. And if you get a chance to see that crowd beforehand and what they're like and what the demographics like, you'll know if some of your stuff's going to work or not. Because if you've got a crowd of, 40 to 60-year-olds, and you make a joke about a boy band, if it's not Take That, they're not going to have a clue.
Yeah.
And that's why your joke's going to fall flat. So knowing what you're performing to, I think, is so key. And it's something I've learned over the last 8-9 months. I walked on stage with that T-shirt once and got absolutely nothing. And it was almost, it wasn't devastating, but it threw me off because I didn't have the interaction I expected. And that was me not reading the room correctly.
Well,
the room was too young for that, so they didn't know. And it was like, oh, why is he? I don't understand. And I was just like, that first joke's not going to make any sense.
Yeah.
You're like, should have just kept it covered for this one and then just gone with something else.
We should say as well that, am I allowed to say what the T-shirt says?
Are.
Yeah, Mark has a T-shirt that says "Not David Baddiel," which really cracked me up when I saw you wear it. And it's also such a good joke because you don't need to say anything, which is very, very rare. I actually can't really think of anyone else that does a joke like that. Because obviously jokes, I'll say obviously, my kind of thinking and a lot of people's thinking is like you have the setup, you have the information you need to convey in order
Yeah.
to enable people to understand the punchline, and you have the
Mm.
punchline. And the punchline is when people laugh. And you want the setup to be as short as possible, as lean as possible, because the longer it is, the funnier the punchline needs to be to justify how long your setup is.
Yeah.
And then you have your punchline, and you want your punchline to be as short as possible, as concise as possible, ideally one word, so that people laugh at the same time.
Yeah.
If you spread it across one sentence, some people might laugh at the beginning. They might get the joke at the beginning, they might get the joke at the middle, they might get the joke at the end, and then the laughter never really coalesces and builds into that one like laugh out loud moment. And the great thing about your t-shirt is that you don't need to say there is no setup. The setup is
No.
just you walking on stage. I've sometimes thought about that joke, and do you think it might have the latter issue, whereby some people maybe aren't paying attention. They look at the t-shirt a little bit later. They look because someone else is laughing, and they think what they're laughing at. They start looking a bit more.
Yeah.
Have you ever done it where you like walk on stage and you like take off a hoodie to reveal, or you take something off to reveal it?
It's an interesting thing actually how that joke has evolved. I say joke. I guess it is a joke without any words. It evolved. It started on the comedy course when I don't know if you've done a course of any kind, or you just gone into just making jokes. But on one of the sessions, we were asked, name somebody who you think or you've been told you look like.
Mm.
And we had a ginger guy in the class, and he went, "Oh, somebody tells me I look like Ed Sheeran." It's like, just because you're ginger doesn't mean you look like Ed Sheeran. But then there was one girl in the room who said, "I've been told I look like a stepmother to an 18-year-old boy," and that was hilarious. It was unbelievable because everybody's expecting something famous, and she's come out with this.
Yeah.
The room was in hysterics, and then it came to me, and I just went, "David Baddiel," and everybody in the room just nodded and went, "Yep, yep, yep." And I thought to myself, how can I leverage that? And I told no one I was doing this. On the our showcase night, I had the t-shirt made, and I literally got it the day before, and I had it underneath a hoodie. And I went on stage, and I just first line, "Hello, blah blah blah," and just to avoid any confusion, "I'm not David Baddiel." And I pulled the hoodie off and then revealed it. And then after about 2 or 3 gigs doing that, there was one time it felt like I was fumbling.
Right.
And when I was fumbling, it was like, no, I started to panic a little bit, and my head was going, no, don't get this wrong, because otherwise you've lost all the effect. It has to be a smooth transition, otherwise it's pointless. You'll get a little bit of a laugh, but you wouldn't get the impact that you wanted. So I then went for the method that you saw, which was just walk on with it and not reference it and let it do its thing. And it works. It's almost that Anchorman thing, isn't it? 90% of the time it works 100% of the time. There's the odd time it hasn't worked, and at the moment it's not actually part of my set.
Yeah.
So I've parked it to one side, but it's being reintroduced again at some point in the very near future. And that's how that evolved. And it was my way of, as soon as I realized people were laughing at it, especially when I didn't reference it, it's the icebreaker in the room. I don't have to fumble words to start with. And I did put up a clip on Instagram of me walking on stage with it. And I've not, basically don't say a word. And the clip, I think, is somewhere between 10 and 15 seconds of pure laughter before I've said a word.
Yeah.
And that never sounds like a lot of time unless you've been on stage for 10 or 15 seconds of silence. That feels like forever. And that's how that evolved. And it's just that little bit of fun, which kind of leads on to quite nicely a segue. This isn't deliberate. On to one of the questions is it doesn't have to be your favorite joke, but one of the jokes that you've created that has evolved over time. And how has it changed?
Yes. I was thinking about this, and One that comes to mind is uh, there was so at uni, I was studying for a PhD in oncology.
Hmm.
And you've seen me do this bit before, but uh, there's like this thing of how a lot of people don't know what oncology is. But they'd
Yep.
often, when I'd say, "Oh, I do this PhD in oncology," they say to me, "What do you study?" I say, "I do a PhD in oncology," and I'd see this look in their face of like they're maybe expecting me to explain what it is. But sometimes I've explained what it is. So people that don't know, it's cancer research. That's what oncology is.
Yep.
But sometimes I'd say, "Oh, I'm doing oncology," and I'd say it's cancer research. And I'm not exaggerating. Someone would say to me, "Yeah, I know what it is. Like my relative like died of X cancer like
Yep.
a couple of months ago." I'm like, okay, I'm so, and that's not a good way to start a conversation at Freshers Fair. So, so I just started saying I study oncology because I didn't want to say I study cancer research because then that makes it look like, oh, look at me.
Yeah. Yeah.
You do, I don't know, ancient history, and I'm actually doing something. That's not what I wanted to go for. I was worried that's how it came across. So I just say I do oncology, and there'd be a moment sometimes where people look at me kind of expecting me to say something. And once this happened, and after a couple of seconds, I was about to say, it's cancer research. And the person went, birds. I just remember we both, like, I like burst out laughing and the look of embarrassment on their face. And I remember they just kept saying to me, please don't tell anyone. Don't tell anyone. I said this. So I don't know if Lucia is listening. Thank you very much, Lucia, for that. Because it kind of because then I think, as you say, like how they develop the jokes, it's really kind of satisfying when you look back at them because it was something that she said to me that was just absurd and ridiculous, and I would never have come up with as a way of
Mhm.
opening a routine. And then I kind of developed it into like, well, what have other people said to me? I just started to think of what other people said to me, and like, there was this one time at a gig before the night where I think they were, yeah, they were from Middlesbrough, and I changed the joke. I changed it to be like they're from Middlesbrough, but they grew up in Yorkshire because I can do like I can do like a 4 out of 10 Yorkshire accent, but I can't
Yeah.
do a Middlesbrough accent at all. And they said to me, "Oh, so what do you do?" And I was like, "I just finished my PhD in oncology." And they were like, "Oh, right, okay." And we got talking, and then I said to them like, "Where are you from?" And they said, "Well, I've come from Middlesbrough." And then they went, "You probably don't know where that is, do you?" And I'm like, "Oh no, it's like by Teesside, like northeast, right?" And they go, "Oh my God, he really has got a PhD." I just I just remember I was bursting out laughing as well. Um, So then I put that into the set, and I made a joke about like the time that I went to Middlesbrough and school trip, and then the punchline I really liked was, and then I like invented a situation. So those first two were like based on something that was said, and you can do stuff that people have said to you and is very funny. But I think also sometimes comedians can recognize that, okay, this has happened to them in real life, and they're retelling us this
Yeah.
in a way that's engaging, and like the delivery is great, and like they've structured the joke well. But then what have they written? Like what have they come up with themselves?
Yeah.
Um, and I'm always very conscious about that. Like I'm not just like telling funny stuff that's happened. If you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
do that to start with, but then you've got to develop it and show what you can do as well. Even if that's just yourself. So I created a situation whereby like I'm at a party and I'm talking to someone and they're very like posh. I love as well. I, so I'm really going a lot of tangents, but I realized early on in my comedy career that if I talk a lot about race, being British Muslim, being Arab, and I realized just subconsciously that whenever I was doing a joke where someone said something racist to me, I'd give them like a kind of regional accent.
Okay.
Like that's what people's default is. Like if someone's racist, they have this particular background and they have this, they come from these parts of the country or whatever. And I just thought, what that's very prejudiced. Like that's very like that is a stereotype. That's something that I've like picked up from the media or from whatever. And so I really and then I also thought about it, and I thought like, well, 90% of the racism I've faced has come from people that are very, very posh, very, very
Yeah.
rich. Um, I remember at uni being asked like after a gig, they were like, "Oh, you're the Iraqi comedian." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah." And he was like, "Oh, so are you a refugee then?" And like the whole set, I've talked about like being from Birmingham and like going to school and this and that, and I speak like this, and he was just like, "Oh, Iraqi, like refugee," and very, very posh guy, very, very posh guy. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do a joke where it's like a posh guy that I'm making fun of now.
Yep.
And I told a bit about he like comes up to me and he says, "Mate, that's so laudable that you do oncology. Like, what's And he says, do you do any research on woodpeckers?" And I say, "Oh, sorry, I think you're thinking of ornithology, not oncology,
Gotcha.
ornithology. I just do cancer research." And he says, "Wait a minute, mate, wait. That's still pretty good, mate. That's still pretty good." And I remember that worked, and I remember just like saying it and thinking, just like as a throwaway line, but it got like the biggest laugh of that section. And then I thought, well, how can you follow it up? Because when you've done a really good punchline, it's like, I only learned this term recently, but there's the idea of tags.
Hmm.
The idea if you can stick on another punchline that
Yep.
uses the same setup, but it's like another easy like laugh to get because you've already done the setup. And I added this tag of saying how oh, he says, "Oh, mate, it's still pretty good." And he says, "To be fair, mate, I didn't even know they could get cancer." And I was so happy with that punchline because it was like the first one's funny, but in my opinion, the second one's funnier. So the people
Yep.
think, okay, the first one's really funny, like, that's it, that's the end of the bit. And then you come up with the second one that builds on the exact same setup, but is hopefully funnier in really quick succession. For me, that's like often like the highlight of the set, and it's very satisfying because, as you say, it started with something someone randomly said to me in 2018, 17, 18.
That's amazing.
Um, yeah, so yeah.
That's really good. That's really. I think it's. I'm just getting to the point where you sort of learn on how to phrase things and how to. What is the actual punchline of the joke? What is the word that makes people laugh?
Mm,
And how you can just turn a joke from you almost inverse it in a weird kind of way, because I have a line that started off something along the lines of my brain's as empty as a Rishi Sunak promise,
right.
which in itself is quite okay, but somebody told me, said, try changing it so now the line is, my brain is as empty as a promise from Rishi Sunak. And for some reason, a word ending in a K
Mm,
has an impact in somebody's head because it's such a strong word, a strong letter. It doesn't feel like there's anything else after. It's
yeah,
almost saying that's the end. Do you see what I mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's those interesting things I'm finding and learning about how the psychology of the brain works and stuff. And I fall into the trap sometimes of, I don't know if you've done this and you may have done it in the past, is when a joke doesn't quite go as well as you think it should. But rather than stopping at the punchline and moving on to the next joke, you say a couple of extra words after it
Mm,
in the hope that it's going to compensate and bring people back into that punchline. 90% of the time, it never works. You should just stop and move on, and don't dwell on the fact that this bit didn't quite hit, and don't try to fix it in the next few seconds that you've got, because you're never going to be able to.
100% agree. 100% agree. What you're saying about the K, that is really fun. I'd never thought about that, and it makes sense. It reminds me of how like Rowan Atkinson with Mr. Bean.
Mm.
I don't know, like, if you read the Wikipedia article, like there's a section where it just talks about like how funny his pronunciation of the letter B is when he goes Bean. It's like
Yeah.
there's something about it that's so, it's like even the way a particular letter sounds, like the phonetics, it can make a huge difference
Yeah.
to how funny a joke is or why you find the joke funny. And like it's really it's like science. It's like you do the joke a number of times, and then you get back data, and you look at the data, and you think, well, what did I change between each joke? What could
Yeah.
be the reason that the laugh is greater or lesser now? And trying to understand why the joke is funny is such a vital skill when you're a comedian, because then when you understand why something is funny, you can apply it to different things, and you can start thinking of, okay, well, this is why joke A is funny. Joke B, or maybe joke D or E or F later on in the set, I want to make them funny for different reasons to keep
Yeah.
it like fresh for whatever, keep it engaging. And what you said about, yeah, that's so, so true. The number of times I always say, like, if a joke doesn't go well, and you're expecting it to go well, it's a punchline. I always try and do one or two things. Number one, 90% of the time, I just keep going and act like it wasn't, as you say, it wasn't a joke anyway. That's
Yeah.
fine that you didn't laugh at it. I didn't expect you to laugh at it. And maintain that level of confidence that you're presenting your set with. Or number two is if you can find something really funny to say in the moment. I used to have a joke where I'd say, oh, there's a tabloid newspaper I saw that said Muslims are waging a war on Christmas. I'm Muslim. Of course, we're not waging a war on Christmas. It's a jihad. And I remember once I did it in a place called Alton. It was in like a working men's club. I think there was like a picture of like the Queen behind me on the stage, and no one laughed when I said it. And then I said, oh, what that reaction tells me is that you don't have a mosque here in Alton, do you? and, then, and then everyone laughed. So there's something you could think of like that, then I think go for it. But what I
Yeah.
hate is when I see, not hate because I think like, oh, you're not doing yourself any favors here, is when someone says, oh, well, you didn't like that one, did you? Or, oh, okay, that one's never going to be done again.
Yeah.
Because I can see why people do it, because you 9 times out of 10 you will get a laugh. But I worry that you're kind of denigrating yourself. You're making people think, because people don't know, like when you go on stage, you could be on the Apollo. Like some people, they don't even know, like they don't even watch Apollo. They just, you might actually be on the Apollo. Like Joe Lycett could come into a comedy club. There's people around that won't know who Joe Lycett is.
Yeah.
And if Joe Lycett does an opening joke that's not great, and the audience is made up of people that 90% of them don't know who Joe Lycett is, it will not go great for Joe Lycett.
Yeah.
So when you do a joke that you say, like, you kind of denigrate yourself, and people start to think, oh, he's just an amateur.
Yeah.
We don't need to treat his jokes seriously. We don't need to expect to laugh at each joke. And I worry that if you lose that, you have a really strong opener, and then you do another joke, and people start thinking, oh, he's not that funny. I won't laugh at the rest of his set. I think the risks are too high with doing that sort of stuff.
Yeah. It's like when I've never done this, but I've seen other comedians do it, and I do. I did a workshop once, and the guy running it said, never ever say this. And it's when a comedian comes on and says, I'm going to try some new stuff. Are you up for this? It's new to them every time anyway.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It doesn't matter whether it's new to you or not. Don't you're using a get out of jail free card. If it doesn't go well, then they're going to go, oh, okay, that didn't work. But because it's new to you, it's always new to the audience, because 9 times out of 10 they've not seen you before.
Yeah.
So don't waste that 2 or 3 seconds doing that. And when somebody comes in and says, "Oh, I'm going to do something a bit more risky," is everybody up for that? I saw a guy, and I honestly can't remember what his name was, and he did a gig, and he was introduced as this was like his 5th or 6th time on stage, and he killed the room. He was amazing. If you'd seen him, you'd have gone, 3 years, 4 years, he's into this.
Yeah.
And then he did a joke at the end about male rape, and the
God,
room just went,
yeah.
gone. Absolutely gone. And it's like, you've just killed your 5 minutes of perfection by
Yeah.
making a joke on an edgy subject that just didn't work. And based on what the room was doing beforehand, the room wasn't ready for that.
Mm.
And all anybody's going to remember from your set now is that end. And it's such a shame.
Yeah. It is a shame, but also it's a learning experience. And if that person learns from there, like, okay, there's something wrong there. It's not even necessarily that you never do the joke again. As you said, like, it could be that for whatever reason the room, well, there's a lot of reasons a room might not be ready for a joke like that. Or it
Sunday
could be,
afternoon.
yeah, 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 absolutely. Yeah, and I 100% agree with not saying I'm going to do some new material. Like, is that all right? Like, as you say, people aren't, most of the time, you're not performing to producers, you're not performing to like comedy industry pros. The jokes are all new to them anyway. And it just makes them think like, oh, okay, I just think like, there's this thing called the observer effect. Have I spoken to you about this in physics?
No.
A thing called the observer effect. I'm sorry if this puts anyone to sleep, but it's fascinating. Where in physics, they were like observing electrons, and they found that if they observed the electron behaved differently. It would behave either as a wave or as a particle.
Okay.
And this gave rise to a field of mechanics called quantum mechanics, as opposed to classical mechanics. And this idea of the observer effect of if you're watching something, the way that thing behaves will change, I think applies in comedy.
Yes.
If you're telling people the jokes I'm doing are new, therefore I'm watching your reaction to see how funny you think they are, the audience starts to sit back and think, okay, let's see, let's judge just how funny these jokes are. Whereas if you don't say anything and present it as your best material, they'll keep laughing as they've always been laughing. And that's what you're really interested in, because 90% of the time, if you're doing a pro gig, you're not going to come out and say, oh, some of this isn't that good. So just be aware of that before you. So yeah, I 100% agree.
So, sort of talking about being on stage, I guess these are two typical questions that anybody's going to ask. What's your best ever performance? And then obviously going to be followed by what's the worst, if you ever want to recount that again.
Best. Yeah, I was thinking about this. Again, you do so many that they kind of. It's funny because the best gig, it might be you doing your 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever of best material, and it goes really well, let's say. But you might be less satisfied after a gig like that than a gig where you do 10 minutes, 8 of it's brand new, and 2 minutes of that brand new goes really well. And then you're thinking, oh, yes, I've just expanded. I've got a really good joke there and I can build it up. And you might feel much better after that than you do after the gig material that you've done since the dawn of time. That goes very well. That said, for me, it was probably, and the one that jumps out is winning the award, Birmingham Comedy Festival. I think that was really good because, one, I was with the other acts of people that I really respected and enjoyed their sets, and two, it felt really nice to be gigging back in Birmingham, where I'm from, to have the crowd made up of Brummies that 99% of them I didn't know. And to be talking about being from Birmingham, that felt really, really satisfying. And then obviously to win was amazing. So that was probably the best in terms of how I felt after the gig, I think. Worst, I was thinking about this, and worst, if we're talking about like worst in terms of my stage reaction, I remember there was this one gig, goodness me, and Mark, I don't know, do you gig much in London?
Yeah, that's
I've
pretty
seen
much
you do a
where.
couple. Yeah, so there are gigs in London that I encourage anyone listening, reach out to me and say, Hasan, should I do this gig? Or to any comedian you know, should I do this gig before you go to the gig? and save yourself potentially an evening of your life.
Yep.
And this gig is one of said gigs. And it was this horrible. Weirdly, it wasn't a basement. It was a room above a pub. Everyone there's a comedian, and the compere at this gig, my goodness me, he could transform any party. You could have David Guetta, like DJ. He could transform that party into a morgue in 30 seconds max. It was actually amazing to see him at work. And I remember this one person, a lot of the acts were terrible. One person came on stage and they were kind of inexperienced, but they were so likable on stage that even in this room, you couldn't help but like laugh a little bit at them and be on their side. And the compere comes on afterwards and he says, right, just to remind everyone that it is really 5 minutes. And if you could stick to the 5 minutes, otherwise we'll be here all night. And no one wants that. Got a lot of people to get through. So and he's looking at the person there, like they're sat front row, so yeah, just 5 minutes next time.
Yeah.
Right. Who's next? I just thought, oh my God, what am I doing here? This is like 4 of 18. And I was on 17th, I performed, and I messed up the opening joke, and it taught me such a good lesson. Like, it doesn't matter how good you think you are. You mess up that opening joke, unless they know you from TV or from a sitcom, their opinion of you has crashed through the floor.
Yeah.
And I never recovered from the opening joke. And I remember as well, one of my best friends from school was there. It was like the first time he'd seen me, and I said to him, "Film it." I just kept saying to him, like, "Keep the camera still. Don't try and shake it. Like, don't try and laugh out loud because it'll blur." And there was no worry about laughing out loud. And that was the least of my problems. So yeah, that was, and it's good to think about these things because I think whenever you do a really good gig, think about the gigs where it hasn't gone well.
Yeah.
And whenever you've done a bad gig, think about the gigs where it's gone really, really well. Just remember, it's like sometimes it's not always your fault. Sometimes it's other factors, and just always stay kind of balanced. It's a good approach, I think.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, sometimes you have to accept that to appreciate a good gig, there has to be a comparison. And sometimes when the bad gigs go really bad, I don't know if you've been in this situation. You may have been in that situation on that night. Is that when you know your material is quite good, or you're confident in your material, and you see other comedians before you, and you think, they're not all that. But I think I can save this room. You have that feeling, and then you just go. Just when you come off stage, you go, I didn't save that room at all. It's just it's not gonna happen. Just accept it's not gonna happen. Yeah. And I've done that so many times. Well, I say so many times. I've done that at least 2 or 3 times at a particular night where the night is just comedians, and you look at the comedians in the room and you kind of, some of them you can go up and have a chat with and introduce yourself. And there's some that feel very standoffish, as a lot of comedians can be sometimes. And they're of the ilk where they're here to perform and they don't care about anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I do them, I always say to myself, don't try and think you can make them laugh. Don't try and save the room. Use it as an experiment. No one's going to see this. If you want to practice some crowd work, use that as your thing. Don't talk to them and try to engage them in your set, and use that as a skill-based opportunity rather than another chance to just reiterate the same 5 minutes again.
So true.
And it's every time I've said to myself, do that, I bottle it. And I do the same 5 minutes and I end up dying. And it's just like, what did you expect? You knew it was going to happen at the start, but you still perceived and thought, I could do it. But no, don't. Just reading the room before you go on is so, so important, I think.
Those are great observations. Yeah, very, very, very good observations. Exactly, you're right. That's people where I've done... I think any big gig I've done where there's like more than... Even if it's just more than like 30 people in the crowd, by the end of like 10 minutes, or even like if you're doing a 20, like 15 minutes, I can pick out people in the crowd that look upset. They just look like they just don't like me. And
Yeah.
when you don't like someone, it is so difficult for that someone to make them laugh.
Mm.
Really, really difficult for someone that you don't like to make you laugh. And you just have to accept that. You just have to, like, as you say, you're playing to less of the room.
Yeah.
And don't worry about the people that aren't laughing. Worry about the people who laugh when the joke is funny and don't laugh when it's not.
Yeah.
Because those are the ones that are really telling you a lot of useful information. The ones that laugh irrespective of what you say, because maybe you've got friends in the crowd, great, thanks for coming. But the ones that you're really focusing on, as you say, those ones that feel meritocratic. They're
Yeah.
laughing when they think the joke's funny and not when it's not.
So actually, this kind of, you mentioned earlier about the winning of the competition. How did you, was that an ambition just to enter it and see what happened, or how did that process work? Because I'd not heard of the being from the South. I've not heard of the very long winner's title. How did you just go for it and think, I've got a chance at this?
Well, it's one. To be honest, I've not heard of many competitions like this, but it isn't open to applications.
Okay.
It's nominated by, I'm not actually sure who nominated me, but it's basically people. I don't even necessarily think it's Brummies that are only gigging in Birmingham, but I definitely think it helps to gig in Birmingham so that you get to be known by the promoters and the guy that runs the festival. But I remember like being aware of it before, and I knew that two people I really like, Josh Pugh and Celia AB. I think Josh is still based in the Midlands, but Celia now lives in London. She may have lived in London at the time as well. Really, really liked them. And I saw that they've been previous winners. So I remember like messaging them, being like, "How can I apply?" And they said, "No, it's just for people that have not been nominated." And I think that comedy competitions, they're inherently flawed because comedy is subjective. Everyone knows that comedy is, to a degree, subjective.
Yeah.
And especially when you've got people that are all good, how can you decide what's better? And also, how can, some people, their comedy is so alternative.
Yeah.
They're constructing a whole world in their set. And then the jokes really start to come when they've built that world.
Yeah.
How can you do that in 5 minutes? You can't. You very, very sort of, you're fighting an uphill battle. Whereas like a comedian that's a one-liner comedian, you could say 5 minutes is much more, naturally suited to that style of comedy. So you're already biasing it against certain styles of comedy. Oh my God, Mark, something I see. I hate gong shows. I really don't like gong shows. Something you will see, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, is I've seen gong shows where I think I watch a man on stage doing terribly, like really terribly. I'd say 2 out of 10, 3 out of 10 max. And they'll do 4 minutes. So if people don't know gong show, people in the audience have cards, and you're trying to last 5 minutes without all 3 audience members putting up their cards and saying they don't like your set.
Yeah.
If all 3 cards go up, you get gonged off. That's it. Your time's over. You've got to try and last 5 minutes. That's the goal. And I've seen people like that, 2 out of 10 comedy, get to 4 minutes and think, get rid of the guy. Get rid of the guy. This is painful. Get rid of him. And I've seen women go onto the stage and do okay. Do like 5 out of 10. Like there's something there.
Yeah.
Gone in under a minute. And I really think, like, even till now, there persists this, and it varies depending, but this is in central London we're talking about, persists this perception of like a comedian looks a particular way and talks about certain things and is a man. Really specifically is a man. And if you're a woman, you walk on stage, people are already thinking, hold on here, what's going on? Are you really funny? And it takes one bad joke for them to be like, okay, you're not.
No, I completely agree. There's I don't know if you're aware of a lady called Kim Hope.
I'm not, but I will look them up whilst you.
she's been doing comedy for quite a while, and I've kind of got to know her over the last 8 months or whatever. And she said she's been doing like comedy for years, mainly on the open mic circuit. But
I recognise her. Yeah, I definitely recognise her.
she did her first Gong show probably about, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago, and I said, "You'll walk it. You'll absolutely walk it." Her energy on stage is chaotic, but it's hilarious. And I messaged her the day after. How did it go? I lasted about 2.5 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm like, you can engage a room on like a normal open mic night for 10 minutes as a headliner.
Yeah.
But a Gong set, just I can't. When you see something, you go, I can't believe that didn't work.
Yeah.
And it's. I think you're talking about it's the perception thing. I think if she was a man, she would have lasted longer.
Yeah.
I think there is a certain element of that, and there's a certain perception of what that person is on stage, and I think sometimes when you get people that are overpoweringly confident, there's somebody with that card feels like they have the power to shut that confidence down.
Yeah, so true. Yeah.
But if that person's a little bit meek and a little bit, there's that, we'll give them a chance. Because I've done one Gong show, and I'm actually doing one next week. And when I did my first one, I actually forgot part of my set. And I said something like, "Oh, this always happens. This is I'm new to this," and I got a cheer.
Yeah.
And I got to 4.5 minutes, and you're just like, you've sat through all of this, and you've missed the punchline of the whole set.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't a Gong set. I know that, but I thought I'd give it a go for a bit of a laugh. But yeah, the perception of some is interesting especially when I've seen some acts which I just don't understand. I can't talk too much about them because they're so unique. But when you see something and you kind of go, it's just not for me. But it's fine. But if I was at a Gong show and I was an audience member and it wasn't for me, I'd feel more inclined to leave them on in the hope they'd win me over. Because I think there's a couple of others I know that have done some Gong shows, and he did one just before Christmas, and he put it on Facebook. I asked how it went. He said, "Oh yeah," he said, "Before I finished my first joke, there was a woman in the front row who was waving a card, and this was at Beat the Blackout where you get 2-minute free grace."
Yeah.
And he hadn't finished his first joke, and she's got a card up. It's like, that's not how this works.
I know people that have gone on stage and they said, "Hi, I'm X, I'm gay," card up straight away. I mean, what message are you? I mean, it's one person. I'm not saying there's not anything bad about the particular venue or whatever, but that is it. It's like 3 people, and you can have the whole crowd laughing, and sometimes 3 people don't like the joke, and that's it. So it's luck. Like a lot of luck is involved.
Yeah.
I don't want to denigrate anyone that does Gong shows or is like really, but I just think, something I would change about this comedy circuit, I'd make people less invested in Gong shows, because I think a lot of people, they do them and they think like that's how they're going to be spotted, or that's how they're going to be seen by a venue, and 99% of the time that is not. Like, people do King Gong at Comedy Store in London. It's like the most famous Gong show, the most brutal Gong show. And I know people that have like done it like 4 or 5 times. They're thinking like, "Oh, the next time I'll get another, and I'll be that much closer." People win the Gong Store and they win King Gong and they never get their promised 10 minutes at the Comedy Store, or they do their promised 10 minutes at the Comedy Store and that's it. They never hear from the Comedy Store again. You do not get into the Comedy Store long term by winning King Gong.
No.
But for a lot of open mic comedians who are yet to hear the wisdom of the open mic podcast with Mark Cox, where else do they go for this knowledge? No one teaches you, "Oh, you're going into comedy, just read this quick PDF that tells you this is how King Gong really works, this is how Gong shows really work, this is how you get booked, this is how you write emails to promoters, this is how you get on blah, blah, blah." Which is why a lot of people do courses, and why courses are, I know some people think, oh, I've seen someone post about how they're making comedy, they're like packing out with too many people and they're making it difficult to get
Yeah.
on gigs because there's so many people. What a ridiculous thing to say. These people, like comedy is inherently like a bit inaccessible because of how steep the learning curve is. All
Yep.
these people are doing is teaching people how to navigate that curve.
Hmm.
And you have people saying, "Oh, there's 2 minutes." That's competition. Like
Yeah.
if you think you're struggling because of how many people there are that have graduated from courses, my advice would be become better at comedy
Yeah.
so that you stand out more. There's such a an elitism about some people in comedy. They really think that they have a God-given right to be doing comedy and anyone else. It frustrates me a lot.
That's an interesting point, actually, because one of the things that has been I've seen recently is that when we talk about comedy courses and people doing them to get onto it, is the sheer number of people that go beyond the showcase from the comedy course is so small.
Mm,
In the course that I did, I'm coming up to 40 gigs. The next person behind me, not that it's a race, but in comparison to how people seriously taking it on, is I think there's one guy who's on about 8. Then the next one behind them's I think on like 3 or 4, and then that's it.
yeah.
Out of the course started with 16 people, so four or five have actually gone on to do an extra gig after, but very few then actually then go on to the next stage and actually try and get on the circuit. So it's almost a misnomer that there is the market's being flooded with people, because there's just 2 or 3
Yeah.
from every course that are doing it. There's not the 16. You've got however many courses run throughout London. You're not getting 100% turnover of everybody then going on to actually doing a show.
I think people are just frustrated that comedy's tough, comedy's like
Yeah,
competitive, and that's exactly as you say. The reason comedy is so competitive is not because of comedy, it's because of like Instagram and social
yeah,
media and YouTube has made people think, oh, anyone can be a comedian. And that's
yes,
how it should be. That is
yeah,
how it should be. It should be that anyone thinks they can, that's why I think a lot of people do comedy because they don't feel that the same barriers exist.
yeah. The other thing I'd always say about some things is that you don't get hung up about clap off competitions and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
They're always quite if you don't bring in enough people, you're not going to win. Just accept that. If you're there to perform, just perform a bit, enjoy it, and then if you get something out of it, then great. I think I think inherently the clap off is a poor way of judging an audience judging a
Yeah,
competition.
of course.
But I also think that there's some way you'd vote for your top 2 or 3 or whatever out of everybody you've seen, which again I think is it's not the best way. The best way I've seen recently, and I know you won this one of the heats, was the clap back to reality,
Yeah,
where the audience members vote on each person. They don't vote for their favourite.
yeah,
They vote on whatever the scale is 1 to 5 and say, yeah, that guy had me in hysterics. That's a 5. That guy was pretty good. That girl was very good. I'll give her a 4. That kind of thing. And you're voting that. You're giving that person a score based on the merit of what you've seen, not in comparison to what other people are doing. If you see what I mean?
Honestly, yeah, that scoring system is if Gary patents that, it'll make him a millionaire. It's a really, really clever system. And obviously, but ultimately, as you said, I really think that's the most important thing. If you're a comedian listening to this podcast, open mic comedian, I think the most important advice has just been said when you said, like, don't go into competitions really hung up about winning or not, because it's a comedy competition. How is that ever going to be fair? Even with Gary's fantastic 5-star scoring system, it's never going to be fully. It's impossible for it to be fair because people have different tastes,
Yeah.
different people on the night. You might have got different scores, whatever, different judges, whatever. Like, and I think you begin to realize that is that the people that from this kind of current crop of people that are doing the circuit now, do you honestly think that the guys that make it onto Live at the Apollo will be the ones that necessarily won the gong shows or won?
Yeah.
No, that's not. That's never. That is does not signify that at all. And to an extent, that's right, because a comedy competition can never be a true recognition of.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as there's no such thing as the best comedian. Objectively, it's all subjective, regardless.
Yes.
So don't get too hungry. The number of times, honestly, Mark, I've had people message me saying, "Bro, it's BS about this competition. I can't believe this competition. They only prefer this type of comedian, or they only prefer this type." Just relax. Just go into it. Do your bit. You're rolling the dice, basically. Fair enough. Roll the dice. Fair enough. All these reasons to do the competitions. Do it, but appreciate that you are, to a large extent, rolling the dice.
Yes.
And sometimes you may win, and sometimes you may lose. And that's just life.
Yeah, it's so true. Just you almost have to treat each gig, each competition just as a gig, and just forget it and forget anything else that's around it. It doesn't matter.
Exactly.
And go ahead and enjoy it. I've done it before where I've seen a list of the people that are performing, and I've gone, he's better than me. He's better than me. He's better than me. He's better than me. And I've just gone. I said to a friend of mine, I said, it's not going to happen. There's not going to be any winners coming tonight. And he went, I'm sure it'll be fine. He's a comedian. And I sent in the list, and he went, okay. I see what you mean. Because some of them are just that much better. And you're like, and I then take comfort in that the person I put my vote in for was the person that won it. And you kind of go, the best person, the person that made me laugh and made the room laugh was the winner. It's fine. I accept that. And I went into that going, I'm not going to win. It's fine. I'm just going to do my 5 minutes. I'm going to get some laughs out of it. And hopefully I'll get a half decent video that I can use. And that's what I wanted
to have. Yeah, great attitude to have.
But you've I don't know if I'm fair to say this. You're kind of graduating beyond open mics now. Is that fair to say? Because you're now you're a signed artiste.
yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
So how have you found that whole process?
Oh, honestly, Mark, we could do a whole series about getting an agent, getting signed. So this is and if we're talking about comedy, how comedy has an inherent learning curve that's very steep. I think trying to get an agent in the industry, it's even steeper. It's even more like there's even more of those things that I wouldn't have known that, I wouldn't have known this, and there's even fewer people to tell you that, to advise you. I am signed, and that has helped. It definitely helps, and it gets you, I think, in rooms and in conversations that you wouldn't otherwise get into.
Yeah.
And it does give you a certain level of it's impossible for me to prove this really, but it does give you a certain level of a promoter sees that, okay, this person is represented by an agent, therefore they must be they might be good. They might be worth taking a chance on, whereas before I'd have to have been told something good by another promoter, or maybe I'd have to have really enjoyed the material that I saw in the video or whatever. I think the most important, again, if people are listening and want advice about getting an agent, I'd say the most important thing is that getting an agent is absolutely by no means the be all and end all. There are a lot of unsigned acts out there that, in my opinion, are better than signed acts right now.
Yeah.
And also that being signed to a bad agent is much worse than not being signed at all, in my opinion. So I think it's and it takes a long time. The people I'm represented by now, I've been speaking to them for about, I want to say, 18 months, nearly 18 months before I was signed. And to an extent, that's good, because you are learning about each other. You're getting to know each other. There's an element of trust that develops a relationship, because like ultimately it's all about relationships.
Yeah.
I mean, many of the arts industries are about relationships. So yeah, I think like a lot of people I think are quite stressed about that because, but I just say I think like one, like your life does not change overnight when you get signed. Ultimately, an agent is there to like sell you.
Yeah.
You have to be the best comedian you can be, and you need to have like the most sort of arrows to your bow. You need to have something about you that is marketable for an
Yeah.
agent. It's not the case that you sign with an agent and then the next day you're on Live with the Apollo, whatever. Like you have to give them a reason to, for example, convince the producer that you should be on Live with the Apollo. I mean, that's not
Yeah.
how it works, but yeah, you see what I mean. Yeah, so it's just a long, and I've met with, I can't even tell you, so many agents, and agents are. Have you ever watched Frasier, the sitcom Frasier?
Briefly in and out. It's never been on my. It should be. I've been told it should be on my list to watch a
Oh,
lot.
it should
But
be. I love it. It's my favorite sitcom. And there's a character there that's Frasier's agent called BB Glazer, and she is the slimiest, like most backstabbing, like amoral person in the entire show. And you see why agents, to an extent, have to be like that.
yeah,
Yeah, so like I've heard of people like doing show, and it's happened to me where like I'm doing a show and agents said, "Yeah, I'll be there," and it's taken you months to get that gig booked in central London for them to come to. Just don't
yeah.
turn up. It's happened.
Okay. Yeah.
It's happened. I mean, they won't be apologetic about it either. I think one agent did that to me, and then the next day they emailed me saying, "Hey, sorry I couldn't make it. Send me your dates, and I'll see if I can come to another one." I just thought, how rude.
Yeah.
How rude are you? But that's how it works. That's how it works. They feel entitled to do that, I think, because there are a lot of unsigned acts out there. And I think like a lot of agents are basically just lazy. Like they're not out there looking for talent. They're basically just their inbox gets hundreds of emails
Yeah.
and they see, okay, who's gigging in central London that I can come to after work. Whereas, of course, like in a really meritocratic system, you'd have this. Like, and I think this is what a lot of people think happens: is you have agents going to like random open mic gigs just on a whim, seeing
Yeah.
like an amazing act and signing them the next day.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, it just doesn't work like that.
Fair enough. So you've mentioned Apollo a few times. So it's a little fun question for you that you're not aware of. So you become super, super famous. You're about to do your first ever live at the Apollo in front of 5,000 people. You've got your 15 minutes or whatever it is lined up.
Yeah,
What is your walk-on music?
yeah. I think it's a really interesting question because you want something that's going to pump up the crowd. That's going to really. You don't want to be walking onto um God, what's that song? But I'm thinking of like a Simon Garfunkel song. You don't want to be walking onto a Simon Garfunkel song, like full stop.
Yeah.
You don't want to be, yeah, you want something upbeat and like high tempo. But I think you also want something that's going to like give just a little like indication of what's to come, of like what is
Yeah.
this comedian about? And this is something you realize when you're like everything matters when you're a comedian, like the stage, the music, the introduction, the comp, that all matters.
Yeah.
And anything you can influence, you've got to really think about, okay, well, what should I do here? What's the best option to take? I think probably it's maybe a bit hack, but like I probably have like an Arabic song,
Yeah.
just something to give you an indication of like, even you just like hear music and you'd be like, oh, okay, you don't normally hear this kind of music on like the
Yeah.
BBC. Like, what's this guy about? But then you also have to think. I used to open with a joke that I'd say, oh, my uncle came to visit me from Birmingham, and he came to visit me from Bristol, visit us in Birmingham, and I showed him round. And after I say to him, what do you think? And he says, oh, it's a bit dangerous. He's from Baghdad. So if you're doing a joke like that, you don't want the audience to know necessarily that you're Arabic
Yeah,
beforehand,
yeah.
because I look quite like a little bit ethnically ambiguous. I specifically don't, even the fact it's annoying that I'm called Hassan. I'd much rather be called Mark. So it comes as, as even more of a surprise. So you got to think about that. But yeah, I think there's like some Arabic. So there's a song called I think it's called Habibi Nur Al Ain. My Arabic is terrible, but I think it means
It's better than mine.
Mark, I've seen your bit about a bar in Baghdad. You're being harsh on yourself there, Mark. But yeah, I think an Arabic song probably has a song called Habibi Nur Al Ain, which means my darling, the light of my eye.
Okay.
Check out on Spotify, on Spotify, people.
It's an interesting one. What certain people pick. It's quite. I think everybody thinks of. My immediate thought is obviously the upbeat thing. It's the punch. It's the classic one is, for me, the classic one that I is synonymous with one particular comedian is AC/DC, Paul Smith,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that immediate punch. It just has that room's going to be bang. But you make a really good point. Is if you make the room bang, and you're not that energetic,
yeah.
you've immediately then brought the mood of the room down. So you could almost go the other way and have like it's probably a really famous piece of music. You know the film Snatch? You get
I've
the
heard
little.
of it.
There's a little bit of an instrumental stuff that's like dun. I think it's based around Greek music. I think, and it kind of like does a build. And a build. It's like a very. I can't remember the tune. I'd have to find it and probably link it at some point and send it to you. But it builds and 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 then boom, and then it's you,
Yeah,
and then it's up to you to do the rest. There's no hit. It's the building of it that
yeah, the
kind of gets you
crescendo.
going. Yeah. So I think that's an interesting one because my original one has always been I'd love to go out to Chumbawamba and tub thumping. But now you've said it would kill the room as soon as I spoke. Everyone's like, I remember this song from the 90s or the 2000s, whenever it was.
Yeah.
And then it's like, yeah, that's not going to work.
It is. It's
interesting.
And also because like obviously it's very rare that certainly in my experience that you do a gig and they ask you, what walk-on music do you want?
That's why I'm saying at the Apollo. That's right.
Yeah.
Your big stage to show yourself off.
Well,
I've never. Go on.
No, so you never. It's not something that you get the chance to practice.
No.
Which you should to do the research to realize is Chumbawamba appropriate or not. You find out on the night with Chumbawamba.
It's an interesting one. So where else am I going to go with this? Yeah, your recent show, Too Fast. Too
Muslim, Too Furious.
Too Furious. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the one. How did that? How explain the show and how it got to?
Yeah, it's myself and my good friend and fellow comedian, excellent comedian called Aisha Amandouri. I remember we were just at the Fringe last year, and I was always thinking about people to do a split hour with, because going from like open mic to doing an hour is a big leap, and anything you can do to kind of stagger that and make it a bit more manageable, you do. So a lot of people, they split an hour between two comedians, and it also gives you like a friend and someone to kind of discuss with, and because comedy can be a really lonely experience. I just remember seeing her at a competition and really liking her set, and she talks about being Muslim women on the circuit are rare, very rare. Women comedians in general are rare. And it's almost scary how little we knew each other when we decided to do the show. We were just talking at the Fringe. I think it was the second time we'd spoken in person.
Yeah.
And I almost half jokingly said, "Oh, we should do a show." And she was like, "Yeah, absolutely, we should." she's just a very driven person. She did like a lot of the hard work, like to get it. We did it at Top Secret a couple of weeks ago, which was amazing. The venue were great, and I think also we called it Too Muslim Too Furious. I think because we thought, like if you go to Top Secret, a lot of work in progress shows they'll do them at like 6 p.m. So they'll do them before like the main show at 8 p.m. or
Yeah.
one of the main shows at 8 p.m. And 9 times out of 10, the show's just called Name the Comedian Work in Progress.
Yeah.
And I just look at them and I think, oh, work in progress is 60% of the title of your show. Like 60% of your show is telling people the show is not going to be that good.
Yeah.
And I thought we didn't want to do that. We wanted to have something, and to an extent, I get that. Like if you're seeing, John Bishop, for example, you turn up to a show and you think, wait, this isn't as good as Live at the Apollo. It's actually good to know it's work in progress. That's why he's writing jokes for them. And there's a certain appeal with that. But like with us, no one's coming because, our friends will come, but like no one's coming because, whoa, Hasan Al-Habib and Aisha Mandoori show Top Secret. So you want to sell it to them. And we thought like Too Muslim Too Furious just made us laugh. Like it's obviously based on the Fast and Furious film. There's two Muslims. And the idea also of Muslims being furious, I think, really really. I mean, we'd open the show by saying we called it Too Muslim Too Furious because we're both Muslim and we watch the news. And it was really good. Like, it was so many people came. I think, yeah, like more than 100 people came. I just remember thinking, oh, it's a good brand. It was a lot of people that I'd not normally see at a comedy gig. A part of that is because Top Secret is such a famous brand and loads of people walk in on the day. But I remember thinking, that thing of like branding is not something you have to think about as an open mic comedian to the same extent, but you realize as well that like really top people in the industry, I think agents look for that as well. They look for something like, what is marketable about this person?
Yeah.
Because when someone says, I really like Joe Lycett, they never say, it's rare for them to say, like, I like him because of this particular joke that he did or this particular joke structure. It's more about what's he like? How does he make them feel? Like, what is it about him? What's the personality, the brand? And I think, it's realizing that ultimately, as you say, when we were saying at the beginning, like comedy, you have to be your own producer, you have to be your own publicist. You do have to think about these things. What is going to get people through the door is a massive challenge. Yeah. And then a challenge of making them laugh is almost separate to that. It's another challenge entirely.
So have you got any plans to fringe it this year or more single shows?
I think we're definitely gonna do some more single like work in progress shows. Hopefully we'll be doing another one at Top Secret, I think. There's another one, I think we're doing Bite Size Festival, which is in Hammersmith. I think that's subject to confirmation, but it's definitely something we want to take to the Fringe, and the Fringe, obviously, for people that aren't aware, it's just like an accelerator of your development. It's so expensive, and it's just, in many ways, it's horrible, to be honest. But in terms of your comedy development, like being able to perform for half an hour every day for 28 days, it really teaches you a lot that it just takes much longer, or even in some cases impossible to learn just by doing the circuit, which is a horrible state of affairs because it's so expensive and in many ways elitist to do. But I think that's changing with more and more festivals being created across the country that are getting more and more popular. So
So then actually what would be quite good is closer to the time to have both of you come on here and promote the show, tell people what it's about and how it came about and go into more detail and stuff like that. That would be great if you both be up for that at some point in the future.
Absolutely. And if the good listeners want to help put bread on my family's table, follow me on Instagram. That's the best way. I'm using Arab. It's actually, we should talk about that actually. It's like how I always plug my Instagram at the end of my set, and thus I wrote like a bit around that to just make it not feel like something you have to sit through. I feel like the
Yes.
audience deserves jokes. Like they've paid for, you know, whatever, they're here. They
Yep.
deserve 10 minutes of jokes from you. Um, but then the more and more you realize that, like, if you want to get more and more followers, and like, I think probably really every comedian, if they're really serious, that
Yep.
just has to be like an aim. It's like the only way really is to like either have a sex tape or release content, like release sketches and let them get viral, because you just get so many more followers from doing that than plugging at the end of a show in a basement in, I don't know, Dalston or wherever.
Yeah, I definitely, I would say, especially if you look at Instagram, for example, you will get more engagement on Reels than you will ever from a picture. If I
Yeah,
look at anything that I've done in the past, Reels are the ones that always get a level of engagement. It doesn't get a lot big. It will, if a picture got 10 or 15, a Reel's going to be close to 25.
yeah,
So there's something in that the type of content that people are consuming now is very much video based. And the one mistake I see quite a few people do is they don't put subtitles on it.
yeah,
There's a massive thing now where most people, the stats say that most people that consume stuff on Instagram do it when the phone's on silent.
yeah,
So
yeah.
if they can't see any words on the screen, they're just going to skip past it, and they're not going to see it again.
Yeah, and if it's, and weirdly, like, not even weirdly, but it's like, if I see a video and it's really amazing quality, I'm
Yeah,
immediately thinking, oh, the joke's going to be good.
yeah,
Totally, you know, shouldn't necessarily say, but if you have like your phone at the back of the room and it already just looks kind of amateurish,
yeah.
which is fair enough because these cameras cost a lot of money, but whatever. Yeah, but as you say, there's a lot of stuff to. It's just it's a whole different ball game that comedians have to be aware of and have to learn about. As you say, and there's a lot of learning to do there. But yeah,
Maybe we
it's
shouldn't
important
reveal those
nonetheless.
secrets and keep them to ourselves.
For the paid subscribers, the people that follow us on Patreon to hear more of Marc and Hasan's comedy secrets.
It's not a bad idea. But I want to say, so thank you for being part of this. You're guest number 3.
One honor.
So it's still in its infancy, but as with all podcasts nowadays, they need a niche. So this is something I'm setting every single comedian if they're up for it. I'm just calling this an title thing called the Comedian's Challenge. I want you to tell a joke on stage from this book, The Little Book of Shit Jokes by Sid Finch. You get to pick your joke.
Okay.
But you don't hear it first. You give me a page number between 5 and 95, and there's a joke on every single page. I would like you to put it into your set. They're all one-liners and puns and stuff, and record it, post it, link it, and see if it gets some traction and a bit of fun. I'm intrigued to see how people do it. You can go by the rules of I've been told to do this, or I'm just going to chuck it in there subtly and see what happens. But the other trick is that if you pick a page that somebody else has picked, you have to pick again. So every comedian has their own joke from this book.
First of all, what a great idea. And I would love to see, particularly comedians I don't like, have to do this. I'm definitely going to do it, and I'm definitely going to do the full version of not doing my like coward's intro.
Yeah.
Mark Cox asked me to do. No, I'm not. I'm gonna present this as this is Hasan Al-Habib. It's gonna be plagiarism. Let's make it clear. I'm going to be presenting this as my own work. Let's say page number. I got like a lucky number. Let's say you know what? 66 after my one of my favorite Liverpool players, Trent Alexander-Arnold.
Okay.
The kit number he wears.
Right. Okay. You can have joke
and
one.
Also, Mark, this could be better than my actual material. So let's not rule that out when it's.
There's 2 jokes on this page. Would you like joke 1 or joke 2?
1, please.
I'm glad you picked 1. Okay, the joke you're going to tell, whichever audience you're going to be in front of, is going to be the following. Today, I shocked the postman by opening the door in a horror mask. I don't know what surprised him most, the mask or the fact I know where he lives.
What's the problem? Mark, it's going to be very demoralizing when that gets the biggest laugh of my set. I don't know how I'm supposed to take that as a comedian. No, thank you for that gift. I can't wait to do it.
That's actually one of the best ones.
That's a really good one.
That's pretty cool.
Wait, what could I have had? What was number 2?
Joke number 2 would have been, the patient says, I'm sorry, doctor. I'm just so nervous. This is my first operation. Doctor, that's okay. It's mine too.
No, they're both good. I've got to be honest, they're both good. But you're right. I prefer them more.
So, yeah, thank you for taking part. And people can find you on Instagram at Amusing Arab.
At Amusing Arab, yes. Absolutely.
And I'm guessing there's where you're going to be promoting your various Too Muslim, Too Furious in the future.
All the gigs are all on a spreadsheet there as well. So, yes, much appreciated. People check that out.
Gotta love a spreadsheet.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, yeah, lastly, I'll just say to everybody, thank you for listening. Whichever platforms you're on, please like, subscribe, follow, whichever one it is these days. I lose track. We're on most of the major platforms like Apple, Spotify. I don't even know if Google Podcast is still going, but Amazon Music as well. So you could probably ask Alexa for us. And until next time, enjoy your time on stage. And if you want to get on stage, keep listening. See you soon.